Good afternoon. Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome on behalf of the ICF Gulf Coast Chapter Board. I am Angelica Alexander DeFillo, delighted to welcome all of you today to today's session. I noticed that we still have a few people coming in, so I'll pause for a few seconds just to allow everyone to get situated. Fantastic. It seems like everybody is settled in. Again, a Gulf Coast welcome for today. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening from wherever in the world you are joining us from. We are delighted to have you. A special welcome to our Gulf Coast members and to visitor coaches. If you have not already selected, we would love to have ICF become your chapter home, so please consider us. Today's presenter is Jennie Antolak. She is the president and co-founder of Learning Journeys, an ICF accredited school that's been helping coaches master the art and paradox of transformational coaching for over 20 years. She's known for saying out loud what other coaches are just thinking of, teaching with humor, and reminding people that serious growth doesn't have to itself be serious. The learning objectives for today include being able to distinguish between transactional and transformational coaching approaches to identify when each serves the client best. You'll also be able to recognize the narrative and identity layers influencing behavior and how to coach the who beneath the what. And lastly, we'll apply practical skills to move the coaching conversation from behavior fixing to awareness evoking, creating shifts that endure beyond the session itself. Without any further ado, please join me in welcoming today's speaker, Jennie Antolak.
Thank you, Angelica, and thank you everyone for coming. Uh, I am thrilled to be here. And as we kick things off, I would love to hear from a couple of people what's important about you being here. And so, Rob, I'm going to pick on you. What caused you to show up?
Well, I just copied down the title of your thing here. When the map ends, who shows up matters. So I'm very excited about this whole idea of being. As a kind of a newly retired person, I'm wandering through the forest a little bit. So I'm excited about what you might have for us today.
Excellent. Love that. Joanne, how about for you?
I just saw this yesterday and I live in Minneapolis and I'm feeling like I need to just get grounded with what I know and how I can help and serve. So it feels like and I don't have any clients these days. So I really just like need to get back in it.
I love that. Well, hello, fellow Minneapolis. I'm in Woodbury. So, mm. and anyone else? Chuck, can I ask you?
um, the shift from doing to being caught my attention because I push my clients to be rather than do,
Mm.
and so I know how I view it. I want to see how you view it.
Oh, and I love that. And Chuck, as we go through this, please share your insights and wisdom along the way. And that's true for anybody, is that I hope this is more of a conversation than just a talking head. And that you do jump in and share thoughts, ideas, questions, whatever, that you don't have to keep yourselves mute along the way. But I am going to jump right in and start with the place that I think is why we are all here, is that there is the demand for coaching keeps growing and growing and growing. And Joanne, you talked about this a bit, but I really feel like one of the core reasons why it is growing is because there is this unsettling going on. And when I look at like what happened in the world just with COVID, is that we had this moment in time where all of a sudden we had to go to our safe corners and be with ourselves. And in those moments, we were questioning who we were even for ourselves, much less who we are together. And we were so desperately just wanting a way back to normal, a way back to life. And yet the rules changed along the way. We changed along the way. And so while we have started to claw our way back, we are really seeking old maps for a new terrain. And so really thinking about yes, people want coaching because I think intuitively they know that they need something more than just a plan, just a strategy, but they don't even know how to ask for it. And so I really do feel like they are leaning towards coaching because everything else feels like it's too structured, too set in a certain way, a certain approach. And so I know that I need to rely on myself, but I stop partway in that process. And and so I feel like even on a daily basis, when people call me or when they sign up for our classes to learn coaching, they sit in a place of, well, just teach me how to make better goals. If I'm teaching coaching, um, can you help me help others have clear actions, change their behaviors, and then track their progress, help them improve their accountability. Uh, but where it stops inside of that is that it's a lot of that is external, not internal work. And so we are focused on the activity within the situation rather than the person who is running the show. And we're not even checking that out. And so does the progress have a ceiling to it? And then when the floor drops out, who's the person standing there trying to figure out how to make the next move? And that's where I think that this stops, is that can we help people move beyond just plans and behavior to who am I in these moments and who's making the decisions here? Um, just one second. I really feel like there's some common patterns that they're not telling us that we are broken or that our clients are not ready for coaching and that the work that we're already doing is wrong. It's just signaling that there's more to this than what we're doing and that they know that there's something additional that needs to be checked out and understood and recognized for them to fully move to the desired outcome that they seek. And I see that these are some of the growing patterns, and I see them growing more and more and more with people that I'm working with, is that the progress is polished and they will show up to coaching sessions and they're doing the work and it's amazing. And then all of a sudden something shifts and they can't even comprehend why this is so hard again. Or they achieve all the things on their list and yet they're still not satisfied. they're in this repeat pattern. Think of it as if any of you ever watched Austin Powers, this is going to show my real credibility here of the kind of movies I watch. But in Austin Powers, when he is in the golf cart and he's in the hallway and he's trying to turn around, I feel that there are certain people that every session they're going down the hallway and then they hit this hallway where they have to turn around again and they can't seem to get traction. And it's because they are moving from something that feels comfortable to, I don't know who I am in the uncomfortability. And so there's this start and stop of, do I trust this person? Do I know who this person is? And if we don't build our skill set over and over again, and I really feel like coaching is a muscle that we have to keep building. And I feel that coaches live in this paradoxical world that as soon as we start learning more and more skills, then we realize, oh crap, there's so much more I don't know. And so I have to keep building that. And that's the same thing that our clients are going through. And why these patterns start appearing is because the more that they get exposed to that this isn't just a behavior change, this is a person change, that they start to sit in the paradox of, if I let go of the person that I know, and I am not, and I haven't built the person yet that I'm becoming, who am I? And how will I belong? And do I even fit in this world? And will I make it to the next story? But all of those show up as resistance. They show up as lack of motivation. They show up as flat. And yet they're not failures. They're just signals that they're in the messy middle. They're in between stories. And we have the opportunity to help them with that. Any thoughts, comments, experiences any of you have had? Chuck?
Just to pitch in real quick.
Mm-hmm.
Lots of times clients start off looking at what's the right thing to do? What are the rules I need to follow?
Yeah.
And getting them to say, you don't need to know the right thing to do. Be the right thing for you. And getting them to make that transition, many clients never really do. It's what's the right way, what's the right thing to do?
Well, because they don't know who they are.
Yeah.
And so that's a giant leap of, especially if they're sitting in that place of what's the right thing. They also are having a narrative around who's the right person for that right thing. And do they know that person? And so then it is easy for them to slide back to what they think is right. And so I will ask for, if I could just figure out the right structure, if I could find the clarity that's acceptable, if I can go down a path that's, kind of straight, so people don't think that I'm off kiltered, and it must be logical, because otherwise I will look like a fool. And so even when they hand us goals, as a person, if I hand my coach a goal, I shape it in the sense of these parameters, not in, can you figure out who the heck I am? And I'm asking for a map. If I just have the right map, I will make it through this terrain. But do we really know who's holding the map? And, when you look at, I think a lot of times when we are coaching to the what. What's the situation right now? What's going on right now? What's the constraints? What's keeping you from what you really want? And we're trying to figure out in those questions, where's the disruption in their plot? And where do they want to go in their story? And what's blocking them from that? And so we're asking about outcomes. If you think about even competency 3-2, and this shows what a geek I am because I memorize every single one of those markers, is that at the end of every coaching session, we are asking, what do you need? What would tell you that this is successful? And so we are focused on the outcome that they want to achieve here. We're trying to move them further down their plot. And then if you think about marker 3-4, is we're trying to figure out in that question of what exactly is keeping you from the story that you're trying to live? What's blocking you from your plot continuing? And so we're trying to figure out what are the behaviors that need to be improved, solved, engaged to take action to move this further down so that you can continue to live within the identity that you have, so that you can be a great leader, so that you can be the great mom, so that you can whatever. But identity stays as is. And the goal is primary. But when we coach from that place, we are skipping a huge piece of the puzzle. And so the area that we skip is this little line here that protects our identity, which is the story. And if we don't coach to the story and figure out what's justifying their current behaviors, what's causing them to stop in the process or repeat the process or avoid the process, then while we could create change, we really can't maintain it because I'm creating it from the person that I think I am today, not creating it from the person that I'm striving to become. And so then I feel like I'm out of integrity. Something's not quite right. They're going to find me out. Imposter, whatever the story is. Or an even bigger and more reality-based story around this is that I can't actually be that person because I have to maintain this person. If I go after, if I prioritize my work and I'm known as the person that puts family first, then I will be a bad mother. And so that story, if I don't check out the stories that are upholding the current behavior, then somehow when something goes awry, when something becomes rocky, when the terrain shifts, my stories reorient me and start protecting me because something is at risk. I am at risk. And so I can't just shift a behavior. I can't just take on new actions if I don't upgrade the narrative and start paying attention to who's writing the story, who's in charge of the pen. And do I trust that person? And what do I need to do to trust them? Thoughts, comments, anything any of you would add? Chuck?
I find to be a driver, to be a mom, to be a dad goes hand in hand with development of personal ethics. As you let go of the rules to be, you need a guidance. And I find that personal ethics, how do I do the most appropriate thing, becomes critical to just being. So, such as, for example, when you learn to drive, you were white knuckle, you were checking every intersection, you were watching the lights of every car. Today, you probably drive someplace, get there and go, I don't even remember getting here.
Mm-hmm.
You have become a driver.
Mm-hmm.
But how do you make decisions that's based on your ethics and practice?
Yeah. Yeah. And do we know who's making those decisions? Um, and what changes based on who's in the car with us? Because it all goes back to, I want to be seen a certain way. And if something threatens that, then I will resist, I will question, I will doubt that this is the right route. But we tend to not go to those places because they haven't presented the goal that way, or they don't realize that there's a backstory to the current story. And so we are coaching to the presented narrative, not the one that's upholding that narrative. One of the things that I see happen a lot that stops us in our tracks to even ask deeper questions, to ask, who are you being in those moments, is that one, people give us goals that sound very tactical. I just need a strategy. Well, that's a process. Why would I ask about the person? Or myth two is that I'm only coaching clients and organizations, and that would be weird if I got into feelings. But there's ways to get at their formulas for making decisions without it becoming weird. And so how do we ask deeper questions without turning it into an interrogation or it feeling like, oh, we just went somewhere that we shouldn't. And then myth three is depth means vulnerability, emotion, and therapy. I'm not asking anybody to put somebody on a couch. I'm asking somebody to see who's sitting there and what's their reason for what they're doing, and what kind of processing system do they have in place that upholds this current narrative? And what are they willing to check out inside of that narrative? Some of the competencies alone provide a way for us to check out people's stories without even having it become a place of feeling like we've gone too deep. If you think about competency 4, in that competency, while it says that our job is to create trust and safety, which yes, you better. What tends to happen in that competency is we lean on having people figure out what's their current perception of what's going on. But we put it inside of a container that this is what's so for them. Well, what we don't do inside of that is if you think about this, the structure of a story, one of the elements of story is setting. And if you're going to write a good story, is that you have to really help your readers be able to fully see their setting. And when we are coaching people, to have them describe their setting so that they can see, they can externalize the setting, because the setting is informing how they are interacting with themselves, how they are interacting with others, and how they are interacting with their situation. And the more that we can have them describe what's going on around them and how they perceive the current setting and what part of the setting is worth changing, and what part of them is at risk if they change that, what changes? Then they start to see their situation as a story and them as the main character. And they become more descriptive, and they have all kinds of other ways into their narrative. And then they can, when they can see themselves as the main character, then the actions change, the goals change. But the way that we typically coach is we coach to the behavior to uphold the identity. What I'm inviting you to do, and it sounds like some of you are leaning into this, is that if we can help them figure out who they are and have that person be clear about, okay, if I am this person, then how does that person behave? And what do they run into? What is at risk behaving that way? What do I not pay attention to? What in my setting doesn't bother me anymore? What in my setting do I inform rather than be influenced by? And does it change how I see my goals, how I see my actions, how I see these pieces that are already in place and feel safe? Thoughts, comments, anything you would add?
Well, I can't keep from coming back to just a couple of simple pieces around this, Jeannie. It's for me, it's always been being comfortable, trusting yourself, who you are, and in all your imperfections that go along with that, and not being ashamed of those, but realizing that's part of who you are, right? And the other is then allowing differences to enter the room and be there in a very safe space and understand that I'm different, you're different, everybody's different, and difference is actually very, very good. Um, and and then allowing whoever the client or clients might be um, to feel comfortable being them. They don't have to be robbed. They don't have to be even aiming for a target or a goal. They need to just view self as a great self. And I don't know if I'm saying this very well, but it's the starting point of, really being proud of and trusting who you are.
Yeah, well, and I honestly think, Rob, a lot of us don't know who we are. And that's hard work to figure that out. Because from the moment that we arrive in this world, we start to figure out, how do I survive in this world? And so we start to pick up cues to say, this is what's okay for me and what's not okay for me. And we start to shape our values. Then we start to shape the rules around that, that these are my beliefs. And then I start to shape my identity. And then I create a story around that. And that keeps building as time goes on. And and for some of us, we've never spent enough time to do the work to say, do I even believe that anymore? Is that even true? Um, and and so even the word values, we throw it around as this assumption that everybody understands what values are, but most people have no clue what that even means, and that they are our emotional guides to tell us what is okay for us. But we tend to regurgitate what we think is acceptable as a value. And then when something goes awry, we look externally for a guide versus trusting internally, I got this. Maggie, what were you going to add?
Well, I'm really interested in these distinctions between identity and who you are, outer identity, inner identity. You're talking about, when we're in a coaching room, seeing who's sitting there. I'm also interested, of course, in them seeing themselves sitting there, truly. But I guess what I'm curious about is, if it's not values, if it's not ethics or morals, what kind of vocabulary are you talking about when you're helping people figure out who they are? Is it even vocabulary? Is it a feeling? So I would love to.
Oh, I think it's a combination. I think the identity is built from our values, our beliefs, and our stories. And so we create this narrative based on all of that. And so having people figure out, and it's, have you ever seen, Maggie, the movie? This is going to also date me. Sybil.
Oh, I'm right there with you.
Okay, good. Welcome to my world. For those of you that are too young, it was a movie a bajillion years ago that this gal had multiple personalities. But that's kind of how it feels for us when we are trying to sort through this process, is that there is many different identities that we uphold based on the situation, based on the setting, based on the people that we are around. Think about even when you tell a story. Like, I will tell a story completely different to all my girlfriends than I will tell that story to my mother, because I have a different identity of how I want them to see me versus how I want my mom to see me, or what I'm trying to avoid from my mother. And so how do we help people to start to see, oh, there's a reason why I do this. And what's my story structure for this? And if I can see how I build this up, then can I see, for the sake of the story that I'm waiting for, what do I need to build up? And who am I trying to be inside of that? And what part of that do I already possess? What part of that do I still have to establish and practice? And what's the scaffold? I mean, all the, trying to figure that out. But that's about sorting it out and having ways for them to see it versus describe it. Because I think when we're too close to our own stories to actually access them, because we're always the main character. So we have to have a way to see them, to be like, oh, there I go again. Stacy, what were you going to add?
I was just going to say it's like it seems like kind of a slippery slope here, getting into a therapeutic kind of situation with this identity and, is there a point where you I don't know, where you like a red flag goes up for you that you're like, this sounds like something that really needs to be discovered in therapy as opposed to coaching.
What would be your red flag?
If people keep like hearkening back to an earlier time, something in childhood, um, I guess even something like, a couple of years ago, um, where it seems like there's unresolved conflict or some kind of unidentified um, issue that they haven't resolved.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, so one, I think that goes back to our agreements of what coaching is and what it isn't. If that is something that keeps repeating itself, then I clearly call it out of that's, and I will not label it because that's not my job. But if you need to figure that piece out, then I'm not skilled. This is the boundaries of this. If there is something inside of this that you feel that you can create choice and you feel that you have the ability, the agency to move it forward somehow, then that's coaching.
Okay. I like the way you worded that. Thank you very much.
Carla.
Yeah, I'm thinking about what you said in the last few minutes. You talked about values, beliefs, stories. I think style is another thing that impacts how we show up, our preferences, and how we show up in the world. Um, what I what I think I hear you saying is one of the terms that we use a lot when working with our clients is how is this impacted by or how am I acting based on what meeting some expectation, right? My own expectations, circumstances expectations, a project's expectations, other people's expectations. When am I aligning more to meeting expectations? And maybe some of it is my authentic self, but when am I just I'm just being without without trying to meet expectations. And even in that, we want to meet our own expectations, right? So it's really hard. What I hear you saying is that we're trying to find out not just who our authentic self was or who it is now, but who we want to be. So it's a combination, right, of past, present, future. Who am I so that I can be my most joyful, productive, authentic, um, self
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
without, and on the other hand, from the time you said we're little, we're adapting in a way to meet expectations to survive, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of adaptive. What is it? Conversion. We adapt so that we can be safe, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, so there's some value in it, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm going to go all the way back to that piece of um, survival. So I think from the time we are born is that there's two things that we're given at the same time as our instinct and intuition. And instinct is hardwired for us to not die, and intuition is hardwired for us to not to surrender our own self, our true self. But as you said, we're always adapting to the environment, to the people, because we also need to, we have a primal need to belong. At some point, I will die inside if I don't feel that not only am I safe, but I belong and I feel valued. And so what we tend to do is lean hard on the safety, and why even when we are given people goals, when I say that I need a strategy, when I say that I need to create a plan, those are safe. And those are external, those are things that people can see, like I'm doing the thing. But as soon as I start leaning to what's my thing, how does this person figure that out? And nobody else can see that. Nobody's seeing my processing systems. Nobody's seeing my emotions. Nobody's seeing when I get excited about something, when I'm scared to death about something. And so my intuition, I start to shove that further down, and I move further and further away from knowing that person. And then when the map ends, when everything disappears and it's just up to me, do I know how to make it through whatever I'm in? And Rob, I think it was you that you said that you're in the forest right now. You're in between stories. Which means you're storyless. And we like to create our stories as even if we don't like our stories, they become like dear friends to us. We know them, we're familiar with them. And so when we are storyless, what happens a lot of times is the safety alarm goes up and drives us back to familiar stories when we have said all along, I'm done with those. I'm going this way. But we haven't created that person yet. And that story is still being shaped. And I'm not trusting that that person's going to be there. And so safety kicks in over our ability to trust that I can figure this out. And then we start to justify even in our the other two places of, well, I know how to belong over here. I don't know if I leave and go over there, if there will be anybody there. And I know how I'm valued here. And I don't know if I'll be legit once I get there. And so many people will go back to old work, old relationships, old whatever, because they haven't figured out that piece. And so they go to what seems logical, and they will justify. Logic actually isn't logic. Logic in our worlds are just justifications for the story that we have clung to that moves us in a certain way. Mel, what were you going to add? I'll stop talking. Sorry.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, I'm really curious about this moment in coaching where the client has identified that their story is actually not the story where they want to live in, and quite often that is with my clients, female leaders who have a family, so they actually have these two stories, and they also have they need to survive, and they need to, so there's these two things that are rubbing against each other, and they know that they are not acting authentically to be the person they want to be, but they don't know how. So I'm coaching this how. So how do they practically shift that they still keep their job and are not driving their families away? That's what I'm really curious about. And I wonder if you could share some of your experience about coaching this shift.
Yeah. Well, and I think this is why even when you coach people, it's not a one and done, because this takes work. And if you think about even the coaching process, at the end of every coaching session, well, I'm going to go back. Not that you're in my head, but I got ahead of myself. So taking you back to the beginning of a coaching session is when you set the goal and your person figures out what they're working on for that coaching session. They are trying to tell you is that this is the beginning of where I'm at in my story. This is who I think I am in this story. This is what I see is in my scene right now, or in my plot of the story. This is what I think I need to solve inside of this. At the end of every coaching session, you're going back to that story to say, what's evolved? How have you evolved? What do you have now that you didn't have at the beginning? What has changed? What have you had to challenge in yourself? And then what are you going to go rehearse? Because really what's going on is they're going outside. So you have created this container, this safe space for them to be and start challenging who they are in the coaching session in a way that is absent of other people's opinions. I just have to figure out my own opinions, my own thoughts about self and what's important and how this is important, and my conflict even between being an executive and a mother or whatever it is. And then I have to go back to my ordinary world and I got to go test it out and see what stories I make up about this. What do I use to uphold that it's not acceptable? What do I use to say they're all in? And how does it impact me? What am I picking up on? And how do I translate those feelings, those cues, those signals, and what story do I make up about it? And then what's my justification? And then I go back to Mel and say, okay, here it is. But then I'm collecting the evidence to say, this is what's going on for me, and this is how this is playing out. But I think even looking at where are the conflicts in this? Like, can I be? Logic says, even if you go all the way back to Aristotle and the laws of logic, one of the laws of logic are two things can't be true. And when we are leaning into safety, we start to lean into what externally we use as rules to survive. And one of them is the laws of logic. Two things cannot be true. So I can't be a great mother and a great executive. Those can't coexist. But they can. But that may not be for Mel's client, that may not be what the argument is. And for Mel to figure out what are the conflicting narratives that you're trying to sort through, and which ones are worth trying to reconcile inside of this. And only that person can tell you. But it's always going to be about identity. It's always going to be about values, and it's always going to be about beliefs. And our beliefs are just kind of if-then systems. If I do this, this will happen. If I do this, this will happen. And so helping them figure out, what's my sorting mechanism, and can I see it? And what does it mean to me? And where am I willing to suffer for the sake of a better story? And how much work am I going to be willing to do to make this so? Tanya.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting to hear you talking to this because I mean we're finding lots of people, even books that have been written relatively recently, that are speaking to the importance of understanding that we live right in the middle of a paradox, right? You can be a good mother and you can be a good executive, but we have to understand what and who defines good for us, and recognizing that two seemingly disparaging um, comment philosophies or belief systems can both be true and both hold the same space. Living in the paradox is perhaps one of our greatest spiritual teachers, and I think that it is a place where holding deep presence for someone to recognize that they have permission to recognize that is an important piece of how we coach well.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I agree. Jeanette, were you going to add something?
I don't know if my mic's on, is it?
Yep.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I was just really thinking exactly that, really, that everybody has a different definition of good. And so actually it doesn't, the stories will be often external definitions of good. And actually what's important is for us to work out our definition of good, or probably more often than not good enough. Because there's like perfect, which we often equate to good. So how do I be a perfect mother and a perfect exec? And actually, it's if the two are really important to me, what's good enough in both areas? Bearing in mind, I want the two to coexist.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And what am I willing to figure
Trade, I
out?
guess.
Yeah, and that's exactly what you're doing over and over again. Is you're negotiating. You do this every day. It's nothing new. It's just that when the stakes are high, or we feel they're high, we feel that this is something I don't do every day. Well, you're doing it. You're just doing it unconsciously.
Exactly, yeah.
We're doing it by deciding to show up today or to go see a friend instead. I mean, you're sorting to justify some sort of self for the sake of the situation. And then
And
we
I was
decide,
having that conversation today with a client just around, that they chose to do something because one of their values is about fairness, and this enabled them to honor that. But there was no thought about, so when I'm giving my time to that, what am I trading? And I was saying, there will have been a trade. It's just, it doesn't keep putting its hand up going, hello, you didn't go to the gym today, or hello, you didn't do whatever. And I think so many of us just make those trade-offs unconsciously, day in, day out.
yeah. And can we make it more visible and not to be in their face, but to have them see who doesn't get to have a say in this when you are the executive? What part of being a mother gets put on the back burner? And and so that they can see where they're sorting from and for what reason, because our job is not to make them feel better. It's to make them better at orienting themselves. Can I see my compass? And can I see what's driving me to do something or not something? Because even if I don't change anything, do I feel better about everything? Because I know that I'm the author of this piece.
Jenny, Maggie has her hand up as well.
Oh, sorry, Maggie.
It's okay. There's such wonderful content that we're looking at here. And I'm still thinking about this thing you brought up is you feel that most clients don't know who they are and the hard work it takes to know who you are. And you made this wonderful point about the who that shows up is contextual. We tell a story differently to our mother than we would to our girlfriends. But I'm just wondering, what does it sound like when someone who's done the work talks about who they are? What is that? Yeah. How do we recognize when someone has really achieved some knowingness of who they are? Maybe what does it look like? What does it sound like? What does it look like? But I keep circling back to this. How
What
do
do you
we?
think would be different? What do you?
I sometimes think that when people are in a flow state and the attention isn't inward, when the attention is almost completely outward, that they are so comfortable with themselves that the self disappears.
Mm.
And
So, and what do you mean by that, Maggie?
what do I mean by that? That they're not thinking about themselves. They're not uncomfortable with who they are. There's a level of comfort in who they be.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, and I do think if you think about like um Maslow's hierarchy of needs, I we we start to move up that ladder, and a lot of us, like probably about 65% of us, stall out at either belonging or maybe a little bit above that. And I think our clients, when they start to get more and more comfortable with who they are, they aren't so much measuring against what are other people thinking. I can be more candid. I find ways to say what is there without being a jerk about it. But I still say it. I I I'm not sitting there trying to over reason things. They just are happening. But there's this 1% of us that get to self-actualization. And these are the people that can flow in and out. They're not sitting there worrying about, but they are aware of when they choose to put belonging above becoming, and when they choose to stand out instead of stand among. But it's just part of their being. But I don't think that they announce it to the world. It's just when the world wobbles, they still are like, oh, I guess this is part of the act today. And I think there are some really cool people that have figured that out. Um, and can we help people just get a little more comfortable with the wobble? I don't know that every single one of our clients is going to nail that, but they can get more comfortable with who am I in these moments.
Thank you. That's helpful.
And so even paying attention, and I wrote a whole presentation that we're not even going over right now, that talks about how do we shift our questions, not that all the questions that we are asking. And I think that as you get your certification and your credentials, that they're good questions. We do need to ask process questions. We need to ask questions that consider the context within where we are living and operating. But we also, that's just half of the process. The other half is who's hanging out in that context and for what reason. And I think that's the piece that we can get more skillful at. And I think that is a lifelong art to learn, is how to ask those questions and how to ask them in such a way that they aren't intrusive, they are intriguing, that they allow people to decide if I want to do anything about it or if I even care about that. But it doesn't ease the tension. It just asks them what it even is for them, because maybe it's not tension. Maybe it's something else. And what are they experiencing, and how are they interpreting that? And tomorrow, will you interpret it the same way? And for what reason? And can they see this versus just be inside of it? What we are trying to do, and if we are good at our coaching, is we want them to become observers of self while being the main actor in their story, which means, can we find ways to ask questions to have them sit alongside their story and say, hey, Maggie, I'm going to take you through the journey of today. And so that we get to see what is playing out. And then they get to see really what's playing out.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Have you ever run across a situation where a client is so tangled up in who they are, think they're trying to be today, that you just say, well, let's create a new story. Starting today, you want to be a writer? You're a writer. Now, what do you need to do to become a better writer?
So I just want to confirm, Chuck, that I'm understanding the question is, while they hired you to become a good writer, they're stuck in their current narrative of I'm a bad writer.
Or I'm bad at what I'm doing today.
Mm-hmm.
And after 6 months of still not being able to identify who they are, what past experiences have shaped who they are today, I take them to a point to let's turn the page and let's start over. Now, what is affecting you being a writer? So kind of coming from the other direction.
So now the challenge with that is that you've decided where they need to move to, and they're telling you, I'm stuck right here. And so they need to decide in their goal that they want to move there, that they want to be that writer. So if they say, I can't even imagine being that writer, and yet there's a part of me that still believes I can be that writer, and I need to figure out how to get from here to there, then there's ways that you can have them imagine being that writer, but they have to say that that's what they want.
Correct.
So even just simple things, like having them, and you can't assign this, but you can do this in a coaching session, because our job is not to assign anything. But I've had clients that once I get very clear on the goal, ask, you just found a thank you card sitting on your desk, and it was from you 20 years from now to today. And you open it up, how do you address it to yourself? What are the things that you are grateful for that happened during those 20 years as a writer that sucked, that were amazing, and you just write down whatever they say. And then read back the letter, and inside of that, what are the pieces that are important to explore right now? and then you can dig into some of the where they feel there's movement, where there's, because maybe they haven't given her, maybe they haven't given themselves permission to even imagine that, but maybe this will allow for that.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts about that?
Well, it's basically, instead of looking at themselves from the bottom of the well they're in, I'm asking them to go stand to the top of the well and look down. And what do you see that you, instead of figuring out how do I climb out of the well, assume you're at the top of the well now.
Mm-hmm.
What did you have to do to get to the top of the well?
Right.
So basically, the story changed from being stuck at the bottom of the well to the story is, hey, I was able to climb out of the well. What kept me from doing that? So it's just a
Yeah.
way of looking at it differently.
Well, and think about, so if we just use our questions, sometimes it still feels like we're in the same story. You've just, from your questions, you've just moved me directionally. And so can we use metaphor? Can we use imagination to launch us out of this story to another story and then have them make connections back? That it might free them up. Like when you use creativity, because it leans into play and it leans into the imagination, we often don't put parameters or expectations on how we go about that because it's just an experiment. When I first start with, we have a class called Power of Possibility. It's our foundational coaching class. But the very first thing that I have everybody do is close their eyes and draw who they are becoming. And they're like, what? That's stupid. Why would I do that? But what I am doing is we already have rules about drawing. If our eyes are closed, we're all going to suck. And so interrupting our rule making system to say, okay, what is everybody confined to that feels logical? And yet when we are creating change, it is below logic. It doesn't use the rules of logic. It doesn't matter how much you explain to somebody they shouldn't feel a certain way when you give them clarity. That's why people resist advice, is because they are at a neurological place in their body that is like, screw this. I'm not dealing. They're feeling something beyond what our minds can process. And so let's meet them there. Joanne.
Hi, yeah, Joanne Longe.
Oh, sorry.
Okay. Yeah, and you just gave a concrete example, but I'm just weighing in to say this really practical part of me is just, can you just give a few more examples of how when the client thinks their goal is to organize their lives or just feel less overwhelmed, or like, how do you help hone that goal, and what's the nexus point, or what are some of the practical questions that get you into the let's look at your story versus the story of all the stuff, the transactional story, right? um
And you should be my sidekick because that is in the slides. Thank you. I'm gonna move to, so even here's some examples. I'll move my slide over a little. so you can see it. Oh, yeah, let me show you how high tech I am. Can everybody see this? As I want a detailed plan to prioritize whatever it is. I mean, all these things sound like it's process oriented, or idea strategy, it's transactional oriented. But if you look at where we typically go is these tactics. Or where's the gap? What are we solving for here? And inside of what's already structured, that we typically don't ask about the who. But if you were to, having them even imagine, like, if you said that differently, if you had better communication, what would it be? And I went to the wrong one, but I'm going to go to that. If we look at competency 4, what currently is taking up most of your time? We're looking at the environment not changing. But if we ask them, and I would even change, maybe I won't use the word assumptions because I'm labeling it, but what assumptions are you making about what must stay? If I were to really get at this, I would frame it so it has bookends. Is what do you conclude about what can't be touched? What do you conclude? What do you already like dismiss? What are the things that are movable? Inside of both of those, if you stay within those parameters, what stays the same and what changes? Now, if you change the parameters completely and looked at all the things that you said couldn't move and you moved them, what would happen? How would people see you? How would you respond to how they see you? And what's at risk if you do that to your reputation? What values do you throw away or put in the back burner? What values drive you to do that? So now you're getting to more of what's the backstory of, and what's their buildup that tells them I should do something a certain way or not do something a certain way. Joanne, did I say that right? Joanne, is that right?
Yeah, long A, Joanne. Yeah, this is helping. I'm definitely appreciating the more practical. Yeah, it just was like, oh wow, whoops, this is a stretch. This is where my muscles have atrophied a little bit.
Well, and it takes work because this isn't, we stop. If you think about even our questions, what we tend to do is we ask 1 or 2 questions and then we move on to the next thing. We want to be problem solvers, and that's naturally how we operate in the world. Well, they answered the question, I should probably move on. But what's behind that? And can we get to how are they making meaning? And then once they make meaning of that, what does it tell them might happen if they do one thing or the other? And so then how do they, I'm going to make up a word, but logicize the crap out of it to say, oh, I better not do that, or I better do that. And because that's where they determine action, not in the system itself. Thoughts, comments? And I can send you all this breakdown so you have it. My plan was to have you break out and work on this, but I'm curious. If you were to just take take this last one, where do you feel constrained? And if you can see that we're placing constraint in as the problem, and so it's staying within the parameters. They have to work around this. And what would be the follow-up question if you started with, what do you believe would happen if this work took up more space? And you stayed with identity. Carla?
Who would you be, or how would you adapt in this work that took up more space? What would you be leading with?
I think it's so I'm going to say two things. I think it's interesting that you started with how, because what our mind wants to do is a how question. How question is process oriented. But then you changed it to a what question, which is, you're inviting them to describe it. And so before we even get to a how question, we first want to describe what is going to play out here. And then the how questions make it even more meaningful, is how will that impact how you feel about yourself? How will you respond if people look at you sideways? But can we have them describe first and then get to that other place of movement? I think we use how questions too soon in the conversation, and we haven't figured out the what or the who or when. And if we can figure that out, it makes it a lot easier for them to, by the time they get to the how, they understand where this fits in what they're trying to solve for. Carla, what are you thinking?
I'm trying to think of other questions to ask. Who would you be? I'm having a hard time coming up with a who question. What would be different? But they're all connected to how we show up. They're tangible. How would you feel? What would your feelings be in this new space? I don't know.
Who are you afraid you'll be if you go down this path? Who are you trying to be? How close are you getting to that person? And for the sake of what or for whom? I was coaching a group of physicians, and they had changed their process so that you had to document while you were meeting with patients. And one of the leaders was like, one of my best physicians refuses to document while they are with patients. And so through the conversation, I was asking, well, what part of him is threatened? Part of his identity is threatened by documenting while he is with a patient. And she's like, he's known for his bedside manner. And so what conclusions is he making by splitting his time between being the doctor and being the documenter? And so those are two completely different identities in his world. And so who are you when you're documenting? Who are you when you're the physician?
What if he's more authentic and more himself when he's the interpersonal relational person?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so maybe he's sacrificing some authenticity by stopping and writing.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And yet, if people can figure out what's at threat, do we have language? And then do we have entry into what else could be a way to solve this? Because he didn't want to lose his job. But he's presenting himself as being a problem, but he's not really a problem. We tend to see things as black and white. This is either or. You either do it this way or you don't. Well, but I first have to figure out what is my way. And the documentation is such a small piece of it. But how do we get to what are the other stories that uphold this? And I'm just going to do, how am I, Angelica? I know I'm running up against time. Am I out of time?
We've got 7 minutes. You
Okay.
wrap up in about 5?
Yes. And I'm going to ask the group, how is this for all of you?
I found it
Great.
delightful.
Great.
All right. Because I didn't even do the whole presentation. And I stayed up till 3 a.m. to do that presentation.
I'd like to have a beer with you.
Right.
Oh, done, Rob. May never leave the bar, though, is the problem.
Mardi Gras coming up.
Okay. Yes, I'm there. That's so fun. So now I forgot what I was doing. Well, what other comments or questions does anybody have?
I think one of the reasons I chose to attend was because I think this is not an easy task. I think it's a very challenging task. That's why MCC coaching is mostly about being, right? And ACC seems like it's mostly about the doing. I mean, you can be both in both areas, but there's a progression with how we coach, and this is a challenging thing. And so, quite honestly, this was clunky for me. You know, it's a hard. It seems it's not as smooth or easy as some other topics that you do on a workshop. It's thought provoking. I appreciate that, but I think it's clunky.
It is, and that's such a perfect word for it. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think for
Yeah.
me, it's a little bit like I got my mic on. Yeah.
Yep.
Yep.
It's a little bit like when you first start coaching and you have to move out of giving all the answers and just asking questions. That's really clunky. And I think this shift is really similar. The more you do it, the questions at that higher level, they just birth out of you and you don't know why or how. They just do it in the same way as you stop us telling them how and asking the questions. It's practice, isn't it?
Oh, yeah, yeah. And you can't, like, I think if you stop practicing, then it atrophies, and you really have to be conscious of and pay attention to what kind of questions am I asking. Um, because otherwise our environment is feeding how we ask questions. So,
Jenny,
Darlene,
Jenny, at the
yeah.
beginning of the session, you talked about this, this particular climate we are in the present day, and you used a phrase saying using old maps for this new territory. And it is so much about, I think, getting to the who you are being. And I think the current climate provokes people to what can I do? What should I be doing? Rather than going back to the being. So I really appreciate that part of this session.
Yeah, yeah, because it is safer to source an old map because it's familiar. Everybody is in agreement. It's proven. Why would I not do that? When we're in a terrain that really there is no map yet. The only person that can create that map is you. So, Darlene.
Hi, everybody. I'm Darlene Hess. I'm introducing myself because I've never attended this particular. Um, I just lost the screen there. I guess you changed the screen.
Oh, sorry. What was it on, Darlene?
That's okay. I don't need the screen. I can. There we go. There we go. Okay, thank you. I actually live on Mountain Time and attended New Mexico ICF chapter where I live here, have a lot of ties to the South, and I saw this particular topic on the ICF website. And the topic itself is what attracted me. The time zone must have gotten messed up. I don't do that, but this time I did. And I thought so I got just here the last few minutes to hear what you're talking about, Jenny. And I want to say it's a cutting edge topic. It's something that I do so much of in my coaching, and I was so interested in what you were going to be saying, and I'm so sorry I missed the first part of it. And I saw some ideas about a session two, and I'd love to be able to attend your session two on this topic. This idea, somebody talked about a new map. It is true. It truly is. Whether we're working with individuals or groups, people are wanting to be supported in being something that is meaningful. And we have so much doing, and we have so many abilities and workshops and ideas and books. We know how to do the done, but how do we be the be that brings us the peace and joy and the love that life is all about, really?
Yeah, so true.
Yeah. So I wanted to add that, and good to meet everybody. Wish I.
Darlene, I'm so glad you're here, even if it was just
Thank
for a
you.
little bit.
Thank you so much.
I I will send everybody the slides, and at the end there is an invitation that we do a monthly event, and it does touch one little piece of narrative, but it's all about what happens when the map disappears. And so at our next one, or anyone this month, if you want to join for free, you are more than welcome to join us. So, and I'll shut up, Angelica.
Jenny, this has been just an incredibly thought-provoking topic. And as you can tell, we are all still here. We are now at the end of our scheduled time. So for people who must sign off, we invite you to go ahead and do that in full recognition that the recording will certainly be available. And if Jenny is willing, and there are others who have comments to make or other questions that they'd like answered, We are still available for another couple of minutes so that we can do that for you. But on behalf of the chapter, the board of directors, and the members of ICF Gulf Coast, we definitely are greatly appreciative of your time today. And everyone who joined us today, we truly thank you because of all the things that you could have done in the last hour and a half. We are delighted that you decided to spend the time with us. So thank you for joining today. And again, for those who have to sign off, feel free to do so. And if there's anyone else who still want to stick around for a few minutes to provide comments or questions, we'll hang on just a little while longer. Thank you all.